There we go. There we are. Okay, can everybody see the screen? And actually, I guess you're muted, so I wouldn't know. So hopefully you can see the screen. If you can't see the screen, put it in the chat. That way we can try and get you sorted out. But I will record this. It will be on YouTube, sounds like, and we're going to open it out. It's definitely my pleasure to launch this, and hopefully we can make this a series. I know that probably all of us have been missing our social fix. And I had put up 4 topics to do with for this meeting, and Lee and I guess a few people on Facebook chose this one. These are some thoughts that I've been having for a while. Probably some of you have heard me speculate about these different things, but I haven't put them all together in this way yet. There was one document that Lee and I, more or less myself and this one fellow that was going to be putting together a documentary, and then COVID happened. So just as he was pitching his idea, COVID happened, and I haven't heard anything back out of that, anything to do with History Channel, et cetera. And there was just so much evidence that Jill, you're getting admitted now, that he was trying to get me to distill it down. And I was like, we're talking, 20 and 30 year careers of researching from multiple men. So very difficult to distill it down, yet, I did create a little document. So I've titled this Avalon Arthurology in the 21st Century, meaning here in the Ohio River Valley, or what really should be called the Great River. And yeah, I think that the internet has helped us to advance the narrative. In science, generally speaking, we play the role of skeptic, but what I'm asking for people to do is say, let's start with a premise that we have a hypothesis we think is true. What if we ask some new questions, and then we do the research from there, and then see what we find? Nature will tell us if we're wrong. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of EPMC. This slideshow will be available in the description for the video. And so you'll be able to click these different links. And extended plasma electromagnetic cosmology. Extended means that we're able to cover, myth, archaeology, anthropology, Egyptology, look at hieroglyphics, whatever we have to do in order to understand really kind of where we came from as a species. And it'll help us to look at the archaic plasma scripts and start to identify how did people talk. Now, it was a few years ago I gave that talk where I compared the Culbrin runes based on their names. I think it was like 6 or 8 of them in the paper, and I presented it to the AKHA, where the runes themselves, when you compare the names of them to the etymological plasma scripts from China, you saw coherence between the two, meaning that there was a basically universal language across the planet. It all had to do with what was being seen in the sky. Now, bear in mind, when I did that, Robert Schock had given his presentation about what is Rongo Rongo, and he sort of hinted in that direction. But we didn't have the 8 miles of wall from Colombia yet. That hadn't been announced. And so now we have even more evidence than we had at the time. And until we get down there ourselves, well, I'm looking at you, Arlen. Until Arlen goes down there and photographs it for us, we're going to have to base on what we already have. But also, when we look into the Chinese etymology, we're finding all sorts of interesting data. And the same thing happens when you look at the Culbrin. And then also we're looking at the OOP arts. I know that a lot of people are really big on OOP arts. And so there is a new paper that I'm working on. It's going to end up being a book. There's a whole section on 20 of the more famous OOP arts. And I included our Brandenburg stone in there because, Kentucky #1. And then the other thing about EPMC that I want to just make a plug is that it's open source. You are my peers. I don't need to join. I don't need to impress any, scientific cults. I will make a small segue here. I am involved. I am side involved in a academic flame war that's happening, and one of the people is a Nobel Prize winner, and he said some very embarrassing thing. So I can tell you that I have no appeal to join that side because of the reliance upon authority fallacy and the way they make personal attacks. It's disgusting to see from the inside, you know, when you get CC'd on those things. So as far as I'm concerned, you guys are my peers. You can write peer review. Jill's been reading the papers and sends me feedback from time to time. But there will be links here in the bottom of the slideshow for, you know, how to volunteer. What are the standards for EPMC? And you'll see that, you know, I've tried to design it to be pretty stringent. All right, so going into what we think so far about, you know, Arthurology in North America. Well, this is from Wilson and Blackett. There were, you know, up to 4 King Arthurs. Of course, the final one was I guess the last try to reunite the Brits, and it didn't work out. We really focus on the second one the most, I think. But the first King Arthur is also very important in Wilson and Blackett's work. And then we think that Matic came in either the 12th or the 6th century. And we say 12th century only on account of what we see at well, not only from the traditional lore that you hear people talk about, like Troxel, et cetera, but also because the broadest site in Madison County, the pottery shards actually date to the 1100s. That's if you trust carbon dating at all. And then we have, you know, some kind of battle happened at Spratt's Farm near Frenchburg. And there's also stone mounds that have been purposefully buried at Yatesville Lake. There was also some stone burials in Russellville, the land between the lakes. There's a giant mound called Bean Mound. Then there's, you know, there's actually another giant sort of conical pyramid, which may be archaic, at the Butterfield Mounds. There are all these stone forts that have been overthrown by some inexplicably strong force based on the time period. Presumably, if Rome had trouble defeating the Welsh, I find it hard to believe that various tribes that did not even get along necessarily would come and band together and they overthrew them. Then we have all this stuff about China that had come in, and so this is from the Nicholas's work. And I know a lot of us attended their presentation at Cahokia. And then, you know, there were these plagues at Cahokia, and then the French, you know, they came down in the 1500s and found bodies at Corn, Sand Island, and some kind of cairn was supposedly a giant pile of bodies at the Falls of the Ohio. And then the Mandans themselves were unusually, potentially mixed race, according to the descriptions of the Europeans. And then we have some evidence, fairly strong evidence of both, you know, with maternal mitochondrial DNA and paternal DNA amongst the Jewish genetics amongst the Cherokee. Plus, there's other, you know, side discussions, you know, of interesting peoples in Appalachia, which is not really the subject of this one. Oh, sorry, we have a couple people in the waiting room. We admit them. Right. So this brings me to first things first. You know, I think it's important for people to review Rick Osmond's work. I'm not sure if Rick is here. I don't think I saw him. But you know, he has this idea of these stone forts in, you know, Indiana a lot. He does the research there, Ohio, some in Kentucky, I think Southern Illinois, and possibly they used forms of line of sight, smoke signals, optical systems, mica fires, these stone cones that expand light a bit, which appear to be a Welsh system of assistance. And then there's some question as to whether or not there were horses. I would like to see more evidence found in that. However, at this time, I'm not going to include that in the so-called what we know. Horses, maybe not. Definitely, we have found Roman coins, but only in the Great River Valley, not in the western part of the United States. And as I joked with Lee, when it was, he said that it had been declared that these came from World War II vets coming back. I said, did only people from the eastern part of the United States go to Europe, and only people from the western part of the United States go to the Pacific? Which of course is not true. That's not how that works. So it's a little bit ridiculous of a theory, right? These were coins found along trade routes. And then there are some interesting tidbits to do with fluorspar. things that I did not know, which Rick brought to our attention, that the use of fluorspar to smelt iron, various native carvings, so signs that the natives themselves already knew how to mine and use fluorite. And of course, the largest deposits being, this is totally related to the electric universe stuff, in the both sides of the Great River. In the Kentucky side, particularly, is the largest deposit, and then in Illinois is probably, I think, the more active deposit that they're currently using. So that's an interesting set of facts. And then another thing that we have to dig into, we look at the Cherokee myths. We don't really cite them enough. I've cited them many times in our paper. I use them because it's not so easy for the mainstream to say, hey, you guys made this up. All right, we didn't make it up, because this stuff, it's sort of like YOLO could not have made up the Colburn script, because we have it on stones from the 6th century and the 9th century. So he could not have possibly done that. And in the same way, the myths were recorded, and there's never been any real dispute that they aren't legitimate myths. So when you bring them up, it's very difficult for the mainstream to say, hey, this is a forgery. It's not a forgery. It's a legitimate recording of oral histories. And there's not really any reason why we shouldn't take these histories seriously. So they mention 3 things very explicitly: 2 different mound cultures that have different names. You have the Nikotani, which is our primary focus, and the Anikitani or Aniquitangi, which I think are the Mississippians. And I'm proposing that the Nikotani are our foreign ancient Welsh Alleghenians. And then you have in the story, the annihilation of some kind of princely, priestly, even holy tribe of ancient shaman who passed on their titles via an inheritance, which is not an Indian custom. The Cherokee were very explicit about this. It wasn't their custom, and it was never done again. And then there was also a mention of the visitation of slant-eyed giants who returned to the West, and those are direct quotes. And they appear to have, by the time of the oral tradition being written down in the 1800s, combined 2 different delegations. And I don't think that we can eliminate the works of all these other people with the Nicholas's works. And I don't think that the Nicholas's works compete. When I listened to their presentation, I found coherence and symmetry. I did not find an elimination of the conditions that we were, everybody's doing their own research. I'm not going to, put out conjecture that anyone's 100% correct, let alone myself. But what I would say is that there is some Venn diagram of overlap in which the truth will be found. And it can be a little bit difficult, but it's already happening. But basically, after 300 to 400 years, these myths, they do start to break down. So there's some other things we can kind of think about. The Spaniards stayed kind of south and west, and for some reason avoided going to the best hunting grounds. I think it's very doubtful. I mean, unless they were purposely led away from the area in order to keep them from the best hunting grounds and some kind of fear that they would stay, it just seems unlikely that they avoided the area by accident. It seems that they were probably told that the area was a no-go zone, and that they were dragged west, and they were probably more interested to meet these people out of the Kokian and Mississippian regions. Maybe it was superstition. We have these dark earth technologies that the archaic Kentuckians appear to be using, utilizing the same materials. You had burned leaves, animal carcasses, shells, even human remains, layered and set on fire. And then this was done for thousands of years, starting right around the Jovian era background. It was about 7,000 years ago, and really continuing all the way up through the getting obviously very weak, but continuing right up into the I think it was either the late Adena or the Middle Hopewell era, and then they kind of moved off. Some speculating that they were killed off, some enslaved, some that they left. But we see this technology reemerge in the Amazon in the Middle Ages. Then you have this possibility that the Amazonian cities might have been bronzed because they appeared golden, but now that we find the lands, there's no evidence that there's any golden cities there. So if they appeared golden and we don't know where the Michigan copper went, I mean, if I could put two and two together, I think that there's a pretty good shot. So what we really need is some expeditions down there. If they would let us excavate around those sites, looking for some copper isotopes, and then compare that to Michigan copper, I think that we stand a very good chance of proving that case. About as good a chance or better than proving that the Saturn's rings have the same isotopes as the water on Earth, which has been done. Then there's some mica, that's been speculated. I think that Arlen told me that maybe it had been debunked, but there seemed to be some kind of link between the Carolinas and Mexico, and then separately from the Amazon to to Mexico, different parts of Mexico. But it makes me think of some possibility of maybe some kind of triangle trade. We're going to come back to that. And then some kind of naval power or a reason for the Chinese to stay might have been very useful in destroying stone forts, because especially ones like the one at Devil's Backbone would have been very difficult to assail from a military standpoint if they have a spring. The rumor, I think, is that the Indian Fort Mountain used to, or does have, like a seasonal spring, or used to have a spring up on top. Who knows what's been destroyed? A lot of the springs that were there in the Civil War even have been destroyed. There's our Artisan Spring at that new national park we have just south of Lexington, and it just barely runs, but it used to run quite strong. And also the springs at Harrodsburg, at Fort Harrods, they used to be there and they're gone. So it maybe those springs are just moved off, or maybe the climate has changed. There might have been some kind of mixing of people producing these so-called white Mandans. I think that there's a lot of evidence that a lot of the tribes like the Yuchi specifically will mention picking up stragglers from the Mississippian culture after the plagues and bringing them in. We know the Mandans did end up becoming mixed with the Hidatsa, and now there's nobody left that speaks the original Mandan language or knows what it sounds like. And so I think that there's quite a possibility here that the remnants of these tribes were then rounded up and then just moved on. And so that's why there was plenty of these stories of pioneers meeting, having chance meetings with Mandans and other people who had connections to the Welsh, but no overt connection, no like the meeting of the Creek or the meeting of the Crow. But I think that maybe they were around and just kind of everything get mixed up. I think that reminds me of what's that book, The First Man, Thom's book. He kind of covers that a little bit. Of course, that book is a work of fiction, but it is still, I think, useful, and I would recommend people read it. 60 years later, this plague could have easily reached down to Mexico. It could be the very reason why the Aztecs were doing heart sacrifice. It's clear that they revered Venus. Even the Pawnee were doing heart sacrifice up until 1905 to Venus. Of course, Venus was a comet at that time, and is in the Nahuatl as the heart emerging from Quetzalcoatl, and it became the morning star. So I can give anybody those references if they need them. And then we see that there was some electrocomet explosion in south of Melbourne, and we see that maybe it destroyed the Chinese fleet, and that the Koreans had recorded it passing over. There's some electric petrification. I think people should get Peter Mungo Jupp's documentary, and he'll show you the evidence of this. He's a geologist. And if we had one event like that, then probably there's a good chance that we have other events. And I know that some people had actually postulated this electrocomet event or something similar before in the Welsh story. But it's interesting, it's now also a major theory that is postulated by the people looking for Sodom and Gomorrah, because they were looking at some Sumerian tablets, and actually there were astrological data about a comet, and then they traced it, and it looked like the comet had passed over and destroyed a city, maybe two cities, and then had struck a mountain in near Naples of Italy. So we may have more than one of these electrocomets, and we're not even talking about Tunguska, which is a pretty well recorded historical fact. So looking at Cahokia, when we look to return to these translations, I think it's a work of unparalleled importance. We have very likely, according to the Nicholas's work and according to their own knowledge, especially Lori Bonney's, I guess, family background, there seems to be a strong indication that there are Mexican origins for the Cahokians. It's not something I'm prepared to go toe-to-toe with archaeologists about. However, there's a lot of cultural behaviors, and then we see things that the Chinese had recorded that indicate very strongly that this is probably some form of like post-Mayan culture. I don't know which one. I'm not prepared to say it's Mixtec or Toltec or anything like that. However, I think that it's very obvious that they had come up, and we're going to talk about that. And then, so what would happen if you have the arrival of a rival force? I mean, we don't know exactly what tribe killed the very first Arthur that came in. However, it says very clearly that some Native Americans snuck up behind him and killed him. And I think that could have very easily been an Iroquoian or an Algonquin. There's no proof that it's any kind of Cahokian, and that would be out of era anyways, because the Mississippian culture really didn't get its start until the Middle Ages, the 1000s plus. I guess maybe even in the 900s. However, here's a question: if Matic and them came later on, what kind of situation, what kind of tension would be created with them coming out, whether they came down the St. Lawrence again or came up the Mississippi? Either way, if they establish a choke point at the Falls of the Ohio, if they seize that with military power, because the Mississippians have grown accustomed to their power, and they've gotten kind of weak. Their administration of their colonies is not so strong. That would explain quite possibly why they would need palisades. A lot of people don't ask that question. There's a basic question: why would you need palisades? If you're the strongest, if you have 30,000 people, what tribe without firearms or horses is going to attack you? It isn't going to be the Sioux. It isn't going to be the Cheyenne. They're not going to go out of their way. They're going to try and stay away from your power base. They're not going to attack a city the size of 30,000. So that really only leaves basically two possible, maybe three if you count the Cherokee. But I don't see that there's any evidence the Cherokee would leave the Appalachian regions to go all the way across to St. Louis area in order to attack a city of 10 to 30,000 people. So that really only leaves two options: Moundville, Alabama, or a Cahokian, a Welsh power base, the Nicotanee. And then one thing that they've noticed here is this connection to Saturn and Jupiter. When they talk about what's it called, the marketplace, I guess, zodiac. That's very interesting because even at the Butterfield Mound, it's slightly hexagonal, and there was connections that they mentioned to the Chinese. I think this is all very important data, and I can't wait for it to end up in a paper or some new translation for me to begin using to cite. Was there some type of religious strife between these Cahokians and the Elegui in general, let alone the Nicotanee? If the Nicotanee are a mixed Welsh, like a Cymry mixed with the Elegui race, which apparently this would not be the first time. If Arthur defeats the Romans and then they begin to interbreed in order to make the bloodline strong, according to Wilson and Blackett, why wouldn't they do the same thing here? And so now, what would that do in general? If the Elegui had been on the decline and the Mississippians slowly expanding east and even had colonies in southern Kentucky, and now you have new warriors that come in. They're big, they're strong, they're on boats. They maybe have animals, maybe they even have dogs of war. If you have that kind of situation, then you could see very easily how that would be inflamed. Now, if you add that one culture uses conical mounds and the other one uses platform mounds, there could even be a religious strife. It doesn't even matter that they're similar. The Shia and Sunni Muslims fight all the time, even though to our culture they seem very similar. But over there, the difference is apparently quite large. In that same way, imagine two cultures that have, one has the reverence for Saturn, one has a reverence for Jupiter, because Saturn is the original god and Jupiter is the new god. These are Egyptian level, possibly Egyptian level kind of issues. So then, if we have that kind of indication that there is some, I guess, like Druidic beliefs, could maybe the Allegui have themselves originally been Celtic or pre-Qumri peoples that had come along, or Qumri themselves? Maybe some of the Qumri had come up and left Iberia, spread out. At that time, bear in mind, when you go into the pre-Christ era, there were islands that are now sank, that we've confirmed that they exist now. So Friesland and High Brazil and Doggerland to start with. Of course, Doggerland's in the other direction. However, if there were more islands, it's quite possible that the Qumri had split up and gone in many directions, and that Wales was only their main power base in a certain period of time. They could have been more powerful in the south of Ireland at one time. They could have been more powerful. They could have been very powerful in the remnants of Friesland. We don't really know. Maybe they had a power base on Iceland. And if they came over and formed the Allegui, that would indicate a lot of reason why the Welsh would keep coming here, especially Arthur. Right, the kings, because of the divine right to rule, had the right to continue carrying forward the knowledge of the past. When Thomas Jefferson asked what happened to the tremendous animals at the Big Bone Lake, it was the chief who stood up and actually gave the answer, not just anybody. And so if the Arthur's family had this memory, or if he had received any kind of teaching from any druid, some kind of Merlin character, then could they have already a knowledge of existence, or did they maybe even have a trade route that occasionally happened? A very, very scant used trade route that wouldn't necessarily end up in the records, or maybe there was a record and the record was destroyed. And then the other question, of course, were the Kokians distinct from the Moundville, Alabama powers? There is some indication that they were religiously slightly different. And in which case, was there an internal tension to the Mississippian cultures? Were there different kinds of Mexican cultures that had come up? So, think about it. How did they come to know that Onfwin was here? And how did all these people get along? You have this power that comes in. Their culture is going to be quite different. They're going to be basically Christians. With some Druidic, how would they get along and form this alliance? Well, you could ask the same thing with the Chinese and the Mississippians. Apparently, they got along quite well up until the plague started to spread. And why would the Indians want to kill Arthur? And why did the Celts want to make conical mounds over in the Isles? I mean, does this have to do with, again, Saturn worship, or what is going on there? Why are there pre-matic plasma glyphs from the archaic and transition periods at the Sprat site? So we have these plasma glyphs that are carved in that have connections to the Chinese, and yet the era that they're coming from, that they're dating from, as in what is actually being recorded there, is indicative of a religion that is antecedent to the Christian era. Now, there are also runes that make specific reference to God and even Christ. However, there are also drawings that are symbols that mean the great man, and they're in Chinese. Some of them look kind of new, but it doesn't seem very likely that new Chinese glyphs, how do I put this? New Chinese glyphs would have the bad form of Chinese written and carved. It seems like, unless it's a Gosford glyph kind of situation, in which it's just some illiterate grunt and that's the only word he knows. However, it seems most likely that they are very old and similar plasma glyphs to the Chinese. And I don't know that there's any proof that the Chinese were there. However, we do know some sort of battle appears to have happened at Sprat. I have personally visited those stone mounds, and they are intact. And the moss on them is undisturbed. They've been there quite a long time. The moss is very thick. The Qumri do appear to be Druidic and Gnostic-like Christians. And so the Broadus site is not a surprise. That's not Broadus up there on the right, though. That is Eagle Mound, just showing off the asymmetric shape there. And that asymmetry that you see of the Alwyn in North America is consistent in Ohio and in Kentucky. So this Alwyn shape being the description for the one God. Of course, this is a cosmic view. They are seeing this up in the sky. They're seeing plasma connect between these bodies in the Lagrange arrangement, and that's all covered in my other paper on where I cover the three-body problem. However, what's interesting is that it is asymmetric, meaning that their view angle was slightly different, and this is a consistency in all the so-called turkey foot glyphs. So did this enable them to establish I have the same religion as you, and then therefore we can be friends and then smoke the peace pipe together? And did the return of them help to establish this forward ancient power? And did they make some kind of peace deal with the Cherokee and the Mississippians in order to control the area? Or did the others not really have any choice? And so this priestly hereditary tower, did the others have to pay tribute to them and treat them as a special church? That seems like that would be a pretty good basis for the complaint of the Cherokee myth. I personally don't put them a whole lot of stock in the kidnapping of the princess. I think there's a rather Helen of Troy kind of excuse. I mean, you don't make 10 years of war on Troy in order to rescue one damsel in distress. You're doing it because you want to sack the city. And I think in this case, probably that's just another excuse. It's a propaganda vehicle that ended up in oral tradition, is my contention. So this is the thing that's been picking at me, and I would love to hear, this could be a small interaction. I would like to hear what people think this map is showing. And remember that the Alleghenians built the conical mounds north and east of the Shelmans, and the Gogans probably west of them. So I'd love to hear, if anybody's feeling brave, just unmute and chime in. What do you think this map is showing? Anybody at all? Lee, I'm going to volunteer you. Is he there? You might have to unmute. Or Jill.
This is Tim. I'm not sure. I'm guessing areas where they found mounds, like the highest concentration of mounds, or is that incorrect?
That'll be a very good guess. Except right here in Western Kentucky, there are lots and lots of Mississippian mounds. In fact, there's so many that I can't get to that I want to get to.
Okay.
That's a good guess. Jill?
I was thinking this was the area of the mound builders, but it doesn't seem wide enough for the Mississippians.
Nope. This is going to blow your guys' mind. So I'm gonna skip to this next slide. This is the Kentucky coffee tree. Now, I want you to notice something. The Kentucky coffee tree has no problem crossing the Ohio River right around the area where the Nicotanee or Fort Ancient people are. No problem at all. And down there near Brandenburg, just crosses right across the river. But then for some reason, has barely made it across. Of course, that's all natural spread. And it is just stuck west of the Mississippi River. And now when we look through these various letters, so A, we have the Obiam's Fort. B is the Hicks Dome area. Now, why in the world, it's not particularly high in elevation. Why in that area where there is obviously what would be sacred, it's an explosive site. There's electrical behaviors. There's lots of Liza gang banding there. Why are there no Kentucky coffee trees there? And then in the Falls of the Ohio, no problem crossing. Indian Fort Mountain, it's almost like it's the southern edge of the Kentucky coffee tree. And then we have the Spratt site. You can see there's also Kentucky coffee trees there. And it's also almost like the borderlands. And then suddenly, again, there's not a massive elevation change from that area to the Appalachians east of there. And it's the same elevation when you go south. So there's not any reason why this plant wouldn't be capable of spreading. In fact, that you could see there in Western Virginia, there's plenty in elevated areas. And look at how it's there in the center of Tennessee, but not right around the area that is the Old Stone Fort, Tennessee. It's almost like a big circle could be drawn around Old Stone Fort. And then look at item G, Lawrence County. That's where the Yatesville mounds are that I mentioned that have been buried under the lake. And there are also reportedly 2 serpent mounds there. There's at least one that I have been to. And then we see the, the shell middens, which is item I, it's pointing up to, that almost forming like a border. There's an entire area where you don't see any Kentucky coffee trees at all. And when you look at the map of the various sites, it's almost like they stay away from this area, like almost a reverence, or maybe somebody had it under their power. And down at the Toltec Mountains in Arkansas, which they say are not Toltec now, but I really think they are. There's, again, no coffee trees in that area. But in the middle of Texas, out of nowhere, there's some. And then way up there in the North Dakota, there are some. So there's a lot of evidence that this plant, which is not native, we can see here that it has roots even in, you have some versions in Italy, but we don't know exactly where it came from. It doesn't seem to obey biological rules at all. I think this is a very important data point, and I'm thankful to whoever brought it up. I cannot remember now who was the first who was bringing that up. It was an AKHA meeting, but having this level of detail analysis is, I think, really important for us stepping forward in our Avalon Arthurology. I think it'll help us to focus. I can't remember where exactly Aztalan is, but it's over here in Wisconsin. I think it's one of these where it's so-called been introduced, but I don't quote me on that.
Why is it yellow there?
The yellow is the modern introduction.
Okay.
Yeah. But then again, is it, right? How much of this is the green is biologically spread, and how much is actually just where they themselves were going and planting their own groves. Robert Ashcroft, who is on the Pulse, he made the point that a lot of these cultures, when they would spread, they would immediately start planting things for brewing, for drinking, beverages.
There's also other plants that come from the West Coast that are suddenly appearing in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
I would love to see an overlay done of this. This is one of the biggest things about EPMC is it's an open source cosmological work. No one needs my permission to go do it. Gather that data. Let's do some overlay, send it to me, we'll get it published, we'll put it out. These were found in Madison County. So again, near to Indian Fort, just at the edge, just basically proximal to so there's an electrogeology site at the southern pilot knob, not the Daniel Pilot knob, but the southern one. And it's overlooking the Indian Fort Mountain. Well, next to that is a thing called Big Hill. When you go up Big Hill, there's a site that I've taken the AKHA to called Dogfoot Hollow. And these were found by a patient of mine and sent to me. We can see very clearly this is a manatee on the left. There's no doubt that's exactly what it is, because you can tell by the snout. And then we have something that looks to me to be from the Mexican Peninsula. And it could be Guatemalan. I have no idea. I'm not an expert in that area. So we need somebody to take this picture down to the natives there and ask them who this is and find out what their deities. This one on the right very well could be Chinese. I've seen stuff when the Chinese exhibit came to the Cincinnati Museum of Art. There were pieces just like this. However, it was found in the same place, and these were being washed down the hill and collecting in the culvert there. Who knows how long they had taken to get down there, and who knows how many else are there. We have to be careful when we excavate there, because it's technically owned by the college. But if we can find some, we can maybe find some more evidence. Here's that map I mentioned. We can see the maroon right in the center. Those are the archaic shell middens, and look at how behaved the Mississippians are, staying west of that. And then look at how, and I haven't covered the sites in Missouri. There's just not a lot of data, and it's not a map that I've updated lately. These are the sites that I had done. It took me many hours to make this map in the first place. And then over here to the east, you see all of the red ones are the Adena, and the blue are the Hopewell. And these are lots of different kinds of Hopewell that are all over the place. And that supports Rick Osmond's theory of colonization and colonial power. That would not happen if you are a normal Native American culture, that's not going to happen, because as you start spreading around, other tribes that are there are going to make war with you. And then you can see the gray are the 4 ancient sites that they let us know about. Again, there's a whole lot of things that are hidden. There's over 25 or 28,000 data points in the hidden state archaeology map. They don't give that out, even the likes of me.
Are those mounds?
Those are sites. They're various sites. Most of them are mounds, but some of them are burial sites.
Okay.
So I mentioned the plasma glyphs. The Koblen, doesn't have a Chinese equivalent to Shangdi exactly. Uchel is a very simple script, but many of the same rune names show up in the Chinese. So what in the heck are those doing at Sprat site? And could the Kumri have been to Anfuin during the Jovian and Aryan eras? When we say the Aryan eras, we don't mean that the people. We mean the age of the planet Mars. Could the between 7,000 and 700 BC, 7,000 years ago to 700 BC, could the Kumri already have been here? There have been people who've speculated that Atlanteans came here. Could the Atlanteans have then settled in Iberia and the Kumri mixed with them and come over and form the Algonquins? And then the Algonquins already had their heyday and then shrank back. We don't really have enough data because, well, number one, they're not going to do it because of NAGPRO. They're not going to do the work. And number two, we don't interface enough with people who are descendant of those tribes. I mean, you just don't meet them. I've met one guy from the Chesapeake, descendant of the Chesapeake tribe, and he spent all of his time on the politics of the issue rather than on the myths and the histories. So we would really need to speak with them and get deep into what evidence is there. And that's not as readily available. We need to find a way to make that stuff more readily available in this modern era, because a lot of these archaeological documents are held basically classified. They're a lot of work. Now, if somebody gets me a title and then I have a whole list I can compile, I can go down to the University of Kentucky. I can log in with my account, and most of them I can download, but some of them even remain hidden to us even then. The broadest studies have not been released to the public. Now, I think that's because they're on a top secret military base, and I think that's probably why she doesn't even answer emails. However, I mean, that's a problem. If we don't have enough data, then we can't move it forward. So I would encourage everybody, scour the web, DuckDuckGo. Here we have various motifs. Bruce's Culvertown platform, I think it's clearly a cosmic egg motif. That's my personal opinion. But there is some kind of megalithic behavior that he has identified in different sites, platform areas that need to be explored. And of course, the walls, we need to get answers about the walls. I know that some carbon dating was done before. I'd like to do more sampling like that. The cosmic egg from Lexington would have to date to at least, according to standard, if you use standard dating techniques from the mainstream, if you agree with the mainstream, then you're going to have to date it to before 10,000 years ago, because that's when the star was expanding, and in its diameter ratio is roughly 1.4. So we know that now the star is already headed toward its final stages, according to the Columbian rock art. That Columbian rock art really is a godsend. Again, I don't believe it's a Cherokee princess. So what are the real reasons the Alleghenians and Paducans, Nakatani were wiped out? What is really going on there? And an interesting thing brought up by Nick from the Pulse: could Nikatani be etymologically related to nicotine? So far, he didn't find any evidence, but I'd like somebody who is an expert in languages. Jill, I think this would be a good area for you to go and explore that and really deeply find out. Could the word have been exported and then re-imported? I don't know how that would work, but it's definitely something to explore. What size army would it take to destroy this kind of power? Wouldn't you need some kind of naval power? I doubt that the Welsh showed up and burned their ships. I mean, that's only a technique when you need to conquer a land and you fear that is a force that you won't be able to defeat. So you show up and then you burn your ships. But you wouldn't need to do that if you were the Kumri, right? You show up and you park your ships and you use them as a headquarters until you've built all of your forts. Again, why did the Kokians have to have palisade walls and interlocking gates? Did the Chinese get betrayed after they had a convenient union? Why would you go to war with the Mississippians if you felt bad about spreading plague with them? I understand if somebody starts attacking you because they have plague, but I seriously doubt that the fight evolved in that kind of way. I'd say it became more of an insurrection kind of situation, sort of an post-Iraq war situation. Were the Aztecs or others kicked out of North America by the Moundville powers? Did they bring up and then those powers in order to exact revenge? Was there some kind of organization between them and the Cherokee and the various other tribes that came and joined? Tribes that hated each other, like the Shawnee and the Cherokee were enemies, and yet it appears that they joined together. And were there really Toltecs in Arkansas? And again, we're not done yet. The fake Maddox sites in the South, they're not fake. A lot of them are related to various EPMC topics. The main one I'd like to focus on is Old Stone Fort. There is definitely something there. Unfortunately, in between industrialization and pioneers settling there, and then, looting and picking anything you'd found anytime recently, there's basically nothing left but the clear military style walls that are around the site. But I encourage people, if you have not been, don't go in the summer. This is muggy as heck, but go and see for yourself. It's too big to be held by the Spanish. It's just plain too big to be held by the Spanish. There's no indication that the Welsh were there. So what empire was there? Was this an empire that was of the era of Poverty Point? Where did that kind of military power go? Where have all these cultures gone to? We have more cultures that we don't know about, that we may not even have the names for. And there seems to be lots of different names from different people, but what did they call themselves? And was there a trade that was controlled, like a triangle trade? And did the Kumri destroy them, threaten them? Were they already gone? Did they take? Why'd they build Obiam's Fort? If the Old Stone Fort was a separate empire, a Moundville-related empire that controlled trade with the North, and they had this sort of balance, well, then Kentucky would cut that in half. And if the fluorspar and the pearls out of the Green River and all of that was controlled, and also the power of the so the Kokians would do various, the Nicholas has covered this, they would do various taxes through different kinds of colored corn. Well, if you could also use beads the same way, and if you enacted a tax on all the copper export that was eventually going to get down to the Amazonians, or at least down to Mexico, that would be a major disruption. And was Obiam's Fort installed down there in the southwest of Kentucky in order to say, hey, this is the final extent of this power. Do not cross this power if you have not paid your tax. And you notice, if you really go back and look, let me go back to it. Obiam's Fort is right in the middle of this area where there's no crossing of the Kentucky coffee tree. You see that? It's like number A there. It's slicing it in half, basically, as the crow flies. And then when you get up here past the Brandenburg Stone, then suddenly when you have these other Mississippian powers, and you have the mixing of the the different kind of rune stones that occupy central Kentucky, the Kentucky coffee tree is being exported back and forth. What is that about? We don't know. We need more data, and I think that it's worth everybody exploring and getting out there and finding more information. How about the Algonquins, Iroquois? I should have stated. Look up here. You can see that in the turquoise, there are some Kentucky coffee trees that are way out of seasonal range, up in New York and in the Northeast. Why are they there? How was this brew used, for establishing peace, trade, et cetera? What was its part to play in the real economics of this situation? And how did the Southwest natives know about the giants from the East? Or did they really? I mean, is that just rumor? I mean, we don't know. We need more information. If anybody's planning to go out to the reservations out there, maybe you'll make some connections and you'll actually talk to the people. Maybe they'll hand forward. I've heard many times that they don't want to hand out those secrets because every time they've tried to teach the whites, they've been ignored or not listened to. So we can undo that in this modern era. Was there some kind of ancient lost, Cambodia lost, I mean, seriously lost empire from the Tennessee River Valley? I think that there is a religious undertone here. Cosmic Mountains, the Thunderbolt site at Big Sink in Versailles, Kentucky, has to be related. I don't think you can get around the fact that Madison County is right over here, Fayette County with its tombs where the mummies were buried, and then the next county over, or actually between Fayette and the other county, really is this Thunderbolt strike site. I don't think you can get around that, because we see that something similar has happened where the Venus, the comet Venus motif at the Great Serpent Mound, that it also appears to be some kind of electrically formed location. It could also be an explosive site, or it could be both. So the Cherokee being the children of the caves, were they here since the Archaic? Are the real Cherokee the Archaic people? Did they move south and reconvene and set up a new power? Certainly the plague, caused them to reduce their power. They couldn't hold anything north and west of Manchester any longer, really, north of the southern part of Kentucky, the most southern part, like Jellicoe. And so how far were they? How far did they range? What part would they have played in all this? We're not going to conjure up some new myths, but I think that we could maybe find more runestones. It's quite possible. Saturn Cone, Osiris, Horus, Amun-Ra debate. Did one side have a religious feeling that these were, brothers, and the other ones is like a father and son who had a battle, sort of a Kronos Zeus situation? How would that religious difference play into, let's say, ceremony, and ceremony meaning diplomacy, and diplomacy meaning marriage, and marriage meaning economic trade, balances of power, all that European type stuff. And were the burial practices in the Long Burial Mounds considered offensive? It's quite possible. Was writing blasphemy? Did they burn it all? Did it rot away? We see evidence that the Jovian octagons are in the Hopewell octagons. So if they had some kind of math and drafting system in order to make those sites, where did all that writing go? Where did the intelligence for that go? Is it like Egypt situation where, it was taken over, and the new people who took it over burned everything down in order to keep their power and then declared themselves the gods? It doesn't seem likely they declared themselves the gods, but maybe they banned the previous religious system that the Qumri had used, or maybe the Qumri banned something. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they banned certain practices that were popular in the area. Again, could it be another cases of economics and resources couched as a holy war? There's plenty of evidence in history for that. So we need help. We need more data. We need more old sources, more new stones, more field study, more egg motifs, such as the Culvertown, more earthworks. They're out there, guys. I mean, look at this earthwork. This is at the Broadus. This is on the top secret base, which it's been decommissioned. There's no more chemical, within a few years, all of the chemical weapons will be gone there. And you can see the little huts there, the U-shaped huts. And look at that giant Alwyn glyph just sitting there, just waiting for us to walk on top of it. But right now you can't. And so, we need to find more evidence, more things like this. I found another Hinge Mound in Kentucky. Of course, the archaeologists know about it, but we didn't know about it. And it's in Madison County. So now we have the Sea Hinge Mound that we did a visit. We did AKHA at Mount Horeb in Lexington. But as far as I know, I'm the only one from the AKHA that's walked on that site. Now I've got the email somewhere, and I could contact the guy and we could organize something. But it's it's in the middle of a cow range, so I don't know how many people want to step over cow patties. Interestingly enough, though, there's a historic European cemetery in the middle. How many of these mounds haven't been excavated because of European cemeteries on them? And we know that was a practice to kind of like establish dominance over the mound. It's just the way people from the old days thought. We need more oparts and find more and more of them, and let's take a look at them from an EPMC perspective. A good number of them are solved with structured atomic model, but some of them are, we're going to need some archaeological digging. We're going to need etymology help, especially Cherokee language would be very helpful. But I think any native language that we can find We can take the words and through etymology, find perhaps some kind of Cherokee rune or some way to bridge the gap and get more data that connects the Nikotani situation or even the Aniquatangi, because we don't know exactly, what was the relationship between the Cherokee and the Aniquatangi. It's not exactly clear. I don't know. They probably were trade and hunting partners, but I don't know. Did they establish marriage bonds? I mean, at what degree do you make friends with people who are building these giant cities and you don't believe in that? And then, and to what degree do you fight them when you're trade partners? And as they encroach, as the Mississippian culture starts to encroach on your territory, how much tension can that build? And if they are your economic rivals, then why would you join forces with them to eliminate the Nikotani? So these are all really interesting questions. I mean, maybe it is some kind of Romance of the Three Kingdoms kind of situation, and maybe both the Kumri and the Chinese were swaying the balances of power. And I think entire great stories can be written about this, to be honest with you. And of course, I intend to write some of my own. Probably using pottery as a sole means of understanding these cultures is probably a really bad idea. If I walk into your house and I look at your Tupperware, I'm probably not going to know what church you go to based on your Tupperware. NAGPRA is not going to help us it's not going to help the natives or us, actually. And it doesn't really stop the grave robbing. So I think that it would be good if the alt-stream community spent a lot of time interfacing with Native Americans now, and if our culture in general just stop treating them like they don't exist anymore, which is a really weird thing that happens. And if we interface with them and explain this kind of research and show them this kind of research and get them excited about it, we may actually get them to help lobby for a similar idea, but a better idea, one that doesn't just bury away the past and not allow any kind of exploration. Otherwise, you're going to get all sorts of weird things like that archaeologist I had an argument with on the phone who was working with the Creek. And of course, now the Creek are agreeing, oh yeah, we made those stone mounds down in Georgia. And it's like, but if you go back in history, none of the Amero Indians were claiming those stone mounds, right? They were either made by the gods or they were made by the mound builders. And it's actually kind of an interesting history. So if I'm Shawnee, I want to know about a big war that wiped out a bunch of other people in a certain area. I want to know that kind of thing. I don't want that hidden from me. I think I probably at some point will need to sue the University of Kentucky and State Archaeology to open the Webb Museum back up. I think that there is a very strong indication, and you can visit the Pulse episode 1. You can see they don't want people in there asking questions. I think that we need a Foia campaign. If people are familiar with the Foia process, I think that we need to establish a kind of a digitized army and be hitting them with Foias constantly to get more data. I think we should help make a public think about the hiding of the. Whenever I tell people about the Webb Museum, it blows their mind. They can't believe it's there. I think that we need to re-infiltrate the Filson Historic Society somehow, just to see if there's anything laying around. I don't know how to do that. I don't live in the area, but maybe we can make some friends with some young people. Maybe those young people will be willing to finagle themselves into the Filson Historic. I have no idea if they may have sold everything away. They may have given it away to the Speed Museum. I don't really know. Maybe Lee has answers in that direction. I think we need to secure the Wilson and Blackett works and that headstone before they're gone, before it's too late. And we need to go to Wales and cover more. Our single drone, what would you call it, survey of Caer Melon is not going to be enough. We're going to need to compare more information coming out of that area with what we have here and with the Amazonians, because we're seeing correspondence between the circle and square motif, which is a worldwide motif, but we're seeing strong correlation between the Great River area, the Ohio River Valley, mostly in Ohio, those earthworks, and what's coming out of the Amazon. And so we need to walk on those mounds down there in the Amazon. And I'm sure the Brazilians will be more than happy to take American money to walk us around, and they're not going to mind too much if we find a piece of copper. We need to talk to Mexican and Central American tribes. Of course, I want to go down to Costa Rica and measure those Costa Rican spheres. But in general, talking to them and getting them, and we need to maybe look and see if there are these triad stones with agreements between different powers. I have a strong intuition that there are, but short of, meeting a landowner and getting permission to climb on those particular hills that I think that we could look on, we're going to have to talk to people, and they're going to have to help us to come in. What can you do? No, literally, I mean, what can you do? Do you know anything about taxonomy? Do you know anything about etymology, linealogy? Continuing the work for the Cherokee DNA studies. It's very important work. That we have tons of, what's that called? It's now, they've stopped making it, the Kentucky Explorer magazine. That's a lot of lineage data that is in there. We need to probably as a society purchase the entire Kentucky Explorer magazine on disc and find a way to make it searchable. And that could be something that us younger guys could do that know something about the cloud technology, et cetera. We need to recruit some young talent, bring them in. Again, they're flat earthers for a reason. They don't trust the system. And, they have every reason to. All of us here, if you're watching this, you know that the system has lied to us. The cosmology is broken. The archaeology is broken. This is really popular. It's becoming big business on YouTube in the first place. Lots of people with really good channels covering this information. So let's help bring them into Arthurology. Let's let them know. And I mean, it's a little bit kind of tongue in cheek to say, I always have to catch it like, you're going to think I'm crazy after I mention this, because it's already crazy enough learning about the original sun. But earning back our history in an era where they are turning everything metric and denying us connections to those original sacred geometries and golden ratios that were used to build things so precise as as Karnak and the Great Pyramid, is actually really important work. And I want to encourage people to do that. Publish things if you like, and speak to Arlen. I also know a place that does self-publishing here. It's a Kentucky company, and they're the ones putting out my book. And, help us to spread this information. Here's my sources. And there's the broadest site. You can see Cygnus. You can see that's a giant cross. In fact, the top is lengthened, but the bottom is even further lengthened. And we know it's Cygnus because they were gracious enough to put Lyra there for us on the right. And that's Madison County. And that's my presentation. I'd like to take a break from my voice and open it up, and people can unmute as you wish. And we'll just have a little bit of Q&A and discussion.
Is there any way we can make a grid?
What do you mean by a grid?
A viewing, under viewing.
Under viewing.
I mean, I do not have the ability to see more than, well, you have share screen on.
Yes.
So the only thing I see is your screen and the emblem that represents you.
Okay. Correct. So what do you mean by, can we make a grid? Oh, you mean of people? You mean the,
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. It doesn't seem to be making it very big. Let's see here. I thought you were talking about some kind of archaeological technique.
Sorry.
That's okay. There we go. Not a lot of people are sharing their camera.
Well, I still don't see anybody, but you're.
It's not showing. Oh, it's not, is it? It's not showing. So I think that it must be something you guys will be able to do for your own.
Stop sharing your screen and it'll come back on.
Yes, you have to
Oh, okay, sure.
go to the top and. Okay.
And I still think everybody would have to hit their own grid.
There it is.
Joe, you got a camera, don't you?
Yes.
Tim and I have opened up our cameras.
Yeah, so it says view. If people go to view in the upper right, and it says view gallery. And then it'll show up as a big grid.
I've got a big grid on my screen.
But most
Nice to see your faces.
they're not allowing their video.
Correct. Yeah, and you have to unmute yourselves if you. Yeah. Looks
Hi.
like,
Yep.
hello, hello.
All right.
So
Hey, Ken.
it could be open forum, or you could ask me a question. Just let me know if the question's for
Hey,
me.
Chris.
I just wanted to make a passing comment on the King Arthur II, who came to America and was killed here and finally taken back to Wales. The records of that trip has a line in it that always fascinated me. It says that they were following the ancients when they came to America. So that might be something ultimately important.
Yeah, I think it does give some strong indication that the Allegui, that they were a non-Amero-Indian, like non-descendant of the what they call, and this is not to use it as disparaging thing, but Mongoloid DNA, but that they were so they were not Asiatic, but they were descendant of a different vector. Now I don't know particularly what strain or anything, and without access, if they're not going to let us, touch those mummies, I don't know how we're going to establish that.
Well, it'll eventually come out because there are descendants of Arthur, people that are known in Wales that would have DNA, but you're right, and unless we get into that mound in Wales at St. Peter's Church and get some DNA from the actual sources, it'll have to take other evidence. We won't be able to get it from those.
Right. That would be my surmise, is that in the absence of evidence, we make some not wild guesses, but some pretty educated guesses at this point, standing on the shoulders of you giants, and then go from there. Make some bold connections, and then go and look for the data. So far, it's been working pretty good.
Yeah. This, by the way, Shifu, was a wonderful presentation. It opened up a lot of areas for me in particular. The coffee tree graphic was just astounding. I thought at first it's following the waterways, but that doesn't seem to be the case, because there are certainly waterways areas where there are no coffee trees. So
Right.
Something's going on there. That's
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Why in the center of Tennessee, but not in the Old Stone Fort area? That circle of counties around Old Stone Fort without coffee trees is mind blowing. And then when you see also that they really don't exist where the archaic middens are, which is very interesting, because it is known that those people were growing fruiting trees, which tells us it's not an archaic Indian thing. That's one thing we can eliminate, is that the archaic Indians were not interested in the Kentucky coffee tree. It was probably came after them. The fact that it ends like down there at Madison County, and it ends in the Frenchburg area in that county, but then shows up again in the Lawrence County area. Fascinating stuff.
Yes.
Mhm.
Shifu, what does EPEMC stand for?
Extended Plasma Electromagnetic Cosmology. And
Oh,
so the cosmology itself does not need all this, but we can extend the cosmology to discuss things that go beyond. So, for example, the destruction of Wales, and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I've found that it can even fall, it becomes interesting. You can study martial arts with it, like sumo. There's a strong, if you look at the sumo, there's very overt connections to the cosmology. It's literally, in Japan, they're even still considered living gods, these yokozuna, and they're treated with reverence. It's an ancient Shinto tradition. And then when you apply that, when you look across martial arts, you see a tendency to have this battle of two beings on a square platform that's up. What do we see in the Mississippian culture? Square platforms that are raised up. So basically, you're seeing giant dojos And it goes all over the place. The samurai swords, it's all over.
Cool. Now, the plant thing is very interesting. I guess you've read Carl Johansson's books about that. He specifically studied the plants that traveled over the world, and you can tell where different cultures went.
No,
But-
I haven't. And that's again, an area where I don't have enough time. At this point, the cosmology is so powerful.
Yeah.
That it's branching me into 3 directions while I'm doing all the other things that I'm doing. So you guys have expertise. I'm opening it up to you guys. I'm posing, you notice most of the slides are just question marks. And so I'm opening it up, and that's a good area to bring forward and maps. And not everybody, you don't have to write a paper necessarily. You can put together a presentation. I'll host anything that anybody wants on the academia too. But you can also create your own academia sites and open it. They're free.
Okay.
Chris, I think you're
What
muted.
about- What about the plants? I read when I lived in North Carolina years ago that there was a place in North Carolina that has a certain kind of plant that only exists in China and in North Carolina. Have you ever heard about that? I forget what it is, but they found them in the mountains of North Carolina, but they only exist in.
I hadn't.
Tibet.
I'd be interested in that if anybody finds that passively. As an herbalist, I'm interested in that. I hadn't. Chris, did you have a?
Yeah, well, I know that the traditional narrative for the Kentucky coffee tree is that the settlers like to use it for coffee, and that's why, like Abraham Lincoln's dad's boyhood home in somewhere out in Kentucky. I think it's I can't remember the town. There's a military cemetery there, but anyway. They planted, the Daughters of the Revolution planted a coffee tree in honor of Abraham Lincoln's dad and the settlers. And there's good record of them making coffee with it. It's poisonous if you don't know how to do it right, but it's not that hard. So, I think a traditional academic would tell you that, the settlers took the coffee tree to those places. And I don't know, how plausible that is or not.
Yeah, I mean, all those ones that were marked as green are said to be the natural range of the tree. And I don't believe that it is a natural range. I believe it's transplant.
We have the argument as to whether or not bluegrass in Kentucky is identical with English grass. But the question is, was the grass brought from England or was it brought from Kentucky to England?
Right. And if it was done over 1,000 years ago,
Yes.
very difficult to suss that out. Any other questions, comments, anything? But we can open it up. Could be open wide forum. Arlen, are you going down to Columbia soon?
I'm not going anywhere soon.
Speaking
I have
of
to wait for
gold,
the Chinese virus. I have to wait for the Chinese virus to die out first before I go anywhere,
There you go.
even across town.
speaking of gold, Lee and I are listening to a Western civilization professor, Dr. Noble, and he mentions how Spain and Portugal came to South America mainly to get the gold, and they carried tons of gold away. They stripped the buildings that were covered with gold plate and took every single thing that was made of gold, carried it back and, to Europe.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they lost a lot of it along the way. I was watching. Last week. I was watching the Curse of Oak Island, and they recorded a ship that sank somewhere off of Hispaniola with many tons, like 100 tons of gold, and a British pirate went and recovered a lot of it. He took like 34 tons of gold and silver back to England and made some money off of that, became royalty. They lost a lot of it. But I was there at the Coricancha in Cusco, Peru, twice 2012 and 2017. And in there, the guide showed us, there used to be a disk there of the sun, like 12, 15 feet in diameter. It was the holiest place in the AKHA cosmology there. And when the Spaniards raided the place, one guy took that down and claimed it. He owned it. He lost it that night in a game of dice. And so they said, this is the only guy in history that ever won the sun and lost it all in one day.
That's funny.
They melted it all down. They had when they killed Atahualpa, they had a whole room full of gold and silver. So there were hundreds of billions of dollars worth. But Spain took it all back. And what did they do with it? If Spain had set up universities and hospitals and orphanages and roads and housing, they could have been the world power forever. But no, they used it to go to war with everybody else. All they did was use it for plunder. So Spain blew it. I mean, they robbed everybody, and then they blew it on warfare. Yep. And they wound up getting their butt kicked by Sir Francis Drake and the Queen Elizabeth and those people. So it didn't do them any good.
Yeah, and I cover, speaking of things that the cosmology has birthed my work in the MIMS philosophy. I have an entire paper dedicated to the anti-MIMS of war, the way that it destroys instead of builds lives, but not the subject of this talk. But I will say that that whole tendency comes from an ancient religious proclivity of the divine right to rule, and we see it among the Qumri as well. And they probably brought that religion with them to this area, and it probably didn't go over well with the people who were already here, who had a similar enough religion, but it would have been distinct and wholly different. And we can see some indication of the Cahokians, their belief with the cosmic pole. So they were definitely Saturnian in that way, but with them using the platform mounds, chances are pretty strong that they were worshipers of Venus and Mars. I mean, it's all the same stuff that we see worldwide. It's just all about what your emphasis is. For us, it's pretty weird that the Akhenaten's family, that they were all destroyed for worshiping Ra. But in the old world of thinking, if one god is replaced by another god in the sky, and you think that these planet gods, because there's an electrical generation and it changes the climate, if you think that the one that above now has the so-called tablet of destiny, and then you start worshiping the wrong one in the wrong era, this is now going to threaten everybody. All it would take is one eclipse or a comet going by, and you have reason. You're going to get fired up for going over there to war. And people have gone to war for far less. Sometimes they would do it just as a demonstration of bravery. And so now you have a situation where there's potentially economics, there's potentially religious reasons, there's potentially cultural divide. I mean, it must have all come to a boil, and it might have just been very convenient if the Chinese were here and they're powerful enough, or maybe it was another power that came up from Mexico. We don't know. It's going to take a lot of effort from us over the next 100 years. And that's where we got to recruit youngins. Of course, you guys saw my youngin who was on there. But we recruit the youngins to come in and help us do this research. And with the internet, the power of the internet, we're going to find things a lot quicker, hopefully. There's also a lot of bad information. That's unfortunate too.
The Nicholases believe that the Chinese were going after iron because of south of Cahokia are the Iron Mountains.
Yeah.
And they were trying to establish a base there, trying to conquer Cahokia in order to gain access to the great masses of iron.
I mean, let's go with that. So if they were after the iron, they're going to need the fluorspar. If the Qumri are in control of the fluorspar because they have forts at Devil's Backbone, Forts of the Ohio, and Obion, all the way up to Portsmouth. Okay, then if they have that down pat, then the Chinese, that would explain why the Chinese went west first instead of coming east up the Great River. And then who would they be fighting? I think it's worth exploring.
Mhm.
You know, the reason I ever got interested in all this stuff to begin with, as a child, well, there was a museum in town, the MacArthur Museum, that had a bunch of prehistoric things in it in Little Rock. But what really got me interested in it used to be a television show called What in the World? And they would start off by having a bunch of smoke and everything in mirrors, and they would have zoom back, and there would be a statuette or some sort of artifact. And they had a panel of people to guess what it was. And watching that for several years in junior high school and high school, I learned a lot about Central American and South American artifacts. I could pick out, I was as good as most of the people who were guessing. What I'm thinking is, if you had a television show or now a YouTube show, and you would show some of the artifacts that you just showed, what in the world is this? What do you think it is? And get people to guess and bring up strange artifacts and strange markings and all the things you talked about, but put it in a, not elementary, but something that would appeal to young people. Hey, dude, what is this right here? I've got this strange thing. What do you think it is?
Yeah.
And then you take guesses, and then you come out and put down what your idea is. There might be a way to pull people into looking at this sort of thing. Like, you know how they advertise everything, all this clickbait stuff. You won't, there are 45 different things here. You won't believe number 32. And you just start putting down the facts. Did you know that there were 4 King Arthurs? Did you know that a King Arthur was murdered in North America? Did you know the Chinese were here? A lot of different things like that. Let people guess it, participate. And maybe you'll induce some people to get into it in a way, especially if they can go do it in their own backyard, their own county, their own state.
Yeah, I know. That's what interests me. I mean, I'm trying to play catch up to all you all. I feel like I'm coming in behind the ball right now, but there's so much to take in. I know I went with you all into the Cahokia Mounds recently, and just learning all those connections and trying to figure out this whole King Arthur thing. I didn't realize that there were 4 different ones. I thought there was 2, but I wasn't sure.
I thought there was 2.
Was there 2?
There's 4 in the Wilson and Blackett books, but the other 2,
Oh, really?
they were politically inconsequential, honestly. I mean, I don't know how old the 4th one lived, but I doubt it was very long.
I have a question about the 3 artifacts you showed earlier. One of them you described as a manatee.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand the context because I'm not very schooled at all in the subject. But what was the rationale that you used to think that was a manatee? I didn't get a good look at it, but I spent some time around manatees, and what I saw didn't look like a manatee.
The snout, the snout on it.
What about a snout on a caiman or?
Probably what if you held the object, you would note, because when you turn it over, it's smooth and shaped just like a manatee.
Thank you.
You'd have to hold the original, but the question isn't really, why is there a manatee up here? Who carried it and traveled? That is an interesting question. The question is, where are we missing the context of people travel, trade, and they're not monolithic. So we've spent so much time for hundreds of years going, did the Vikings get here? Did the Vikings trade with these people? No, they only went to Nova Scotia. And then they finally admit, okay, the Vikings made it to inner North America. Well, that's all well and good. It took us a few hundred years to accept it for some reason. But the thing that really interests me is, why would we assume that these people behaved any differently than people now? I meet people in various places and they come from far-flung. I find it fascinating. I was in Costa Rica and met some Danes. It's the first time I'd ever met people from Denmark. people go all over the place. It's not really surprising to find Gosford glyphs in Australia. The question is, why aren't we finding more? Where are we not looking for them? Are they hiding them? Have they been destroyed? Even people that live outside of, they live in Dwarka city today, have not been told that 10 miles off the coast is Dwarka that's sunken, because the establishment found it, and then after a few years closed off exploration, said we know everything we need to know. Well, that's impossible. So somebody came in and told that university to stop. And the rumor is what was told to this Indian American who went there by one of the few professors who was willing to speak off camera was that some American or British archaeologists had shown up and told them they could no longer explore the area. Well, I mean, why? What's really being, what is the agenda here? And then they're talking about closing off Machu Picchu. This tendency to bury history, just as we are starting to make connections, is such a threat to finding the truth. I don't know what culture that is, or even I can't necessarily prove that it's a manatee because it's broken, so the tail is missing. But I'm interested to know what other things are sliding down that hill, and why does Berea College, own these? Here's a question for you: why is the stone wall that was on the top of Indian Fort gone? If you're a farmer, you don't need extra stone. You're not going to climb this hill to get the stone. College students aren't climbing up there to carry stones down. So where between 1920 something, when the survey was done, and now have all these stones gone? Berea College owns the hill. So
Lee knows where they went.
Tell us.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
No, I don't know where they went.
I think they went to the bridge, didn't they? Aren't they the
No.
foundation?
That's
Indian
the-
Fort. Indian Fort.
That's
Oh, you're
Devil's
talking about
Backbone. He's
another
talking about Indian Fort.
Oh,
Hey, folks,
For Indian Fort, yeah.
I've got to check out now. I appreciate it. Good,
Okay.
good show there.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Arlen.
Good night.
Chris, you said you had an idea?
Well, for Indian Fort, there is a map that tells you where the original walls are at. And one time when I hiked it, that's the big hiking spot there in Berea. I took the map with me, and I looked around for the walls, and you can see where some of them have just been, kicked down the side of the mountain. You can see the stones where people just kind of vandalized them, and it's a very active spot. There's so many people that just go there for exercise. But I also saw there is a stream at the top. I don't know if it's all year round, but there's a stream at the top of it too.
Seasonal.
There's a several acre, fairly flat land on top of the fort, and I was told by some of the people who had done some work on the fort that they found more than 5,000 arrowheads, not spear points, but smaller arrowheads up on that 5 acre area. And somebody suggested that it was that a battle of some sort had taken place there. I don't think the wall has disappeared other than through natural erosion and et cetera. I don't think anybody ever carried the stones off. One of the things they did find out that all the stones on the mountain in the wall were carried up from the fields. Dr. Burroughs, who was a geologist back around early 1930, determined that they were comparable to the stones that were in the creeks and fields below the mountain and not natural to the mountain. One of the things that I was looking for, I'd heard when I was at Berea College that the extent of Fort Ancient was southern Ohio, and that Fort Ancient culture didn't go south. And I went on Indian Fort specifically looking for a Fort Ancient point, and which is kind of similar to the Cahokian corrugated kind of side point, and did find one on Indian Fort.
Yeah, there are some Fort Ancient sites in Madison County and in Lexington and Fayette County.
Yeah,
They just don't want you to go to them. And I asked them if I could go to the Guilfoyle site, and they wouldn't give me the coordinates to the Guilfoyle site, which is off of the 8th and Spoonsboro exit. And then there are some mounds right off the freeway in the area there, exit 90, I'm sorry, 87-ish. But again, they don't want you to know where they are, and they're all dated from that era. Now, as to whether or not they're actually Nikotani sites or not, I mean, we're not going to know so long as we refuse to even call them by the name that the natives called them and call them Fort Ancient.
yeah.
and you know, but if you overlap where the Nikotani or where the Fort Ancient culture sites are with the runes, the actual stones found that have been covered, you know, in Wilson and Blackett's King Arthur Conspiracy, the sites overlap in the majority. There are some where, you know, these stones were over here, but they weren't there. I don't see Fort Ancient sites. And then there's some Fort Ancient sites over here, and I don't see rune stones. But I don't think that we're going to be able to separate. They could have easily been taken, right? Even in the Iraq War, we went over there and we defeated Iraq. There were soldiers that were, you know, taking things out of Iraq. So if you conquer, I wouldn't be surprised if the stones moved a bit east, or I'm sorry, west towards Illinois. So again, I'm not saying that it definitely was a romance of the three kingdoms. There were definitely a triangle trade, but I think it's worth exploring. I think it's worth postulating and taking this Avalon Arthurology to you know, a new question. You know, what kind of interesting things could have been occurring, and where can we find data that that overlays and lines up? When we see things like with the Kentucky coffee tree, it's not definitive proof, but it's pretty interesting proof, because you see there's an interaction between the tree's presence and cultural sites.
Going with us to Tennessee?
I'm sorry?
Are you going with us to Tennessee to look
When
at
is
the
that?
megalith? We're going to look at a megalith in Tennessee.
We're hunting a megalith. We don't know that the megalith's there. We've heard that somebody out ginsenging and across a stone structure, and their description of it sounds to me like a megalith. And so half a dozen of us or so are going down. If anybody here on the site wants to go, contact me. We'll hook you up with a group. We're just going down to try to find it. Whatever.
I don't think you can go without me.
That's what I was thinking.
We're looking toward you know, first good weather weekend, probably end of February or early March. We have to get out. We have to get down before the leaves.
I would tell you the one thing is that I am coaching kids basketball on Saturdays. So up until that's done, I wouldn't be able to attend. But
okay,
it's definitely something that's in my range. Now, if you're asking me where my research is taking me, aside from Bruce's work and some Hidden Kentucky stuff, because after my current book comes out, I'll begin updating the Hidden Kentucky book, and it'll be put out, which isn't going to be about this stuff per se, but there might be a little update to the book in that direction. But until once that comes out, I mean, a lot of my research is going to take me in the direction of spacer stuff, technology, operations research, but you know, I'll always have room in the extended cosmology for some good anthropological work, and I believe heavily in field work. One thing that differentiates, you know, EPMC setting the standard in the alt stream is that when it comes to like something like archaeology, we can't just do YouTube videos and not do any research, any like groundwork. And I will point out when the YouTuber from Bright Insight, when he went on Joe Rogan, he misled people down, millions of people down the path that the Reshat Formation is Atlantis. So I did a whole paper and I timestamped every minute of that 15-minute segment. I timestamped 51 places, and then I just stepped through and showed that it is impossible for it to be Atlantis. And that kind of basic work would have been prevented. Obviously, if 3 years ago he had followed my links and understood the geological facts, and B, if he had done some field work, if he had just gone to the Reshat before making this theory famous. So now there's millions of people, potentially dozens of millions of people, who actually believe that the Atlantis has been found at the Reshat Formation. Of course, it was never ever at the Reshat Formation, and I have a paper that proves that definitively.
Just a quick question: the Wilson and Blackett book papers you keep talking about. What's the deal with those?
Do you mean by what? Like, what are their names? Do you mean how do you get them? What is your?
Yeah, because you seem like you were saying something about we needed to get access to those or something. Are they being kind of like suppressed?
Well, it's not exactly easy to get them, and it's not exactly easy to get them out to people. It's still there's this weird distortion wave that seems to be blocking their research, and I'm not going to say it's all the archaeological community in Cardiff. I mean, certainly they went through a lot of hell, and Lee would know all those stories. I don't know all those stories, but Lee could tell you tons of conspiracy there to ruin their careers, their reputations, their livelihoods. I think, didn't you tell me, Lee, that their house was burned down or something like that?
Well, they put a firebomb off in the house, and it actually left Baron Blackett in a coma for over a month. I mean, it was a death-defying attempt to stop their research, I'm sure.
I mean, the thing is that this conspiracy is definite, right? The United States Army went out of its way to put a top secret chemical base over top of native mounds that date from the area of Maddox expeditions, and B, to put up a bunch of lakes, one of which we definitely know, because the archaeologists have admitted it, buried 16 stone mounds that have not been explored. And so what is the purpose of this part of the conspiracy? The Wilson and Blackett mostly have to focus on their end of the pond, the part of the conspiracy, which goes all the way back to the 1800s. It has to do with a mixture of anti-diffusion, anti-cataclysmic, anti-Welsh sentiment in the Victorian archaeological community. It was a political need to discredit Iolo Morgan and all of the Welsh tales. But now I put out another paper where I outlined that the Smithsonian is currently actively still engaged in that lie. I mean, it is now, I don't think that the woman who wrote the article knows about this conspiracy, but I think that the Smithsonian definitely knows about the conspiracy. So I don't know why the conspiracy, I don't know what the benefit of it is. Rick Osmond has a theory that Thomas Jefferson himself was afraid that the British would try to conquer if they found out that the Welsh were here. But that era was long gone. Thomas Jefferson was long dead by the time the Devil's Backbone was destroyed and turned into the Big Four Bridge. And now there's no particular indication why they don't want you hiking up there. They're claiming that, I assume that it's some liability problem, but I doubt that. Here's another question. In the Fallsday, Ohio, they have a new video, and the new video has even less information than the previous video. And the only natives mentioned are I think it was the Shawnee. And there's really no answers given at all. It's the most specious and useless introductory video. And it's the main video, not the side one, the Lewis and Clark one. So why is there this need to bury information? I don't know. I don't know why it's hard to put their books out. It's just somehow there's this block to getting the information out. But you can get the book if you find a way. You can purchase them. They just tend to be expensive.
Yeah, I will bring you up to date, Tim, on Alan Wilson.
Yeah.
Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett are really a major part of the ancient Kentucky research. In fact, the group was originally organized focusing on that single question. We branched out over the years, but Jim Michael remained pretty focused on that question so long as he was alive. And
Tim needs to come over to the house and talk to you about that,
Yeah.
because it's a long story, Tim,
It
and
is.
I hate for Lee to get started on it right now because it'll be
But I will make a plug. Purchase Lee's DVD, Jolie Productions, Wales, History and Bondage.
Oh,
Yeah,
That would be
I've
the
actually,
place.
yeah, I've
I-
seen that one.
Oh, you have? Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
I always give those to the new vice presidents.
Nice.
I have another item, Shifu. You mentioned the stone balls, and Lee and I went down and looked at them. And so we also saw the stone balls in Bosnia. By the way, Bosnia is now politically in an unrest situation.
Right.
But anyway, the stone balls, to me, I'm writing a book, and it will be published probably closer to the end of this year. And it is about, it takes place in 11,500 BC. BC. And so the stone balls date back to those times and before, and actually I believe, were a mill. They used them as mills because a lot of them are found with stone bowls that are, equal in size, where you can put the ball in the bowl, and whatever you threw in the bowl got absolutely crushed by these balls. You just took a man to push these balls around, and you'd have crushed stone with some of these 6-ton balls, and which was used to make concrete. The balls are made of concrete, by the way, a special kind of concrete that we no longer can make. Or you could use them for grain, or even small balls could be used in a bowl to crush spices and herbs, just like we use a mortar and pestle. But that's my theory. And in my book, I have the heroine watching one of these stone mills being used, where the people throw rocks into the bowl and the big ball is being pushed around and crushing the stone. So
Well, one of my unique contributions is to use diameter ratios. So my goal is to go down and measure the diameter ratios. Some preliminary, internet. It's not quite napkin math because they're real pictures from the internet, but some preliminary work is showing specific planetary bodies, and one of the ratios ends up being a ratio that doesn't match something bigger than Mars but smaller than Venus.
the
But
thing is,
possibly
they're all sizes, every single size.
I know.
From
There's lots of
down
them.
to tiny
And
handheld.
one of them's tried the one diameter ratio it may match might be Triton, and Triton quite famously has a retrograde orbit, and we have both the story of Hephaestus and Hoder, who slew Balder, being sent away to the other world. And so it's possible that we, one time that we could see Triton. Of course, Triton's a very beautiful gaseous body. When there's light on it, obviously it's very dim from here, but if you put it through spectral analysis, it's actually quite beautiful. And so the question is, how did it get in a retrograde orbit? But that gets us deep into the EPMC theory, especially addendum 2, which covers the breakdown of Shamash. If people want me to show the what's now, aside from all the diameter ratio stuff and the mound orientations and things that I've covered, if you want me to talk a little bit about the Shamash, I can pull up the image from Columbia, but or I could do it in a separate presentation. The actual slideshow is available already on my academia, or you could use the direct. People go to the EPMC gateway.com.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I believe these balls, there are thousands of them all over the world.
Mhm.
They've been located in California and Alaska and Europe and everywhere. And they have a very practical use. In other words, every civilization had a reason to make them.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, well, you see it in the story the Delaware told to Thomas Jefferson. They said the great man stomped his foot. And then when you look at the Chinese word for shock, it means etymologically, it means earthquake. And then in the sumo, there are some words that have plasma glyphics that show the thunderbolts or make overt reference to the thunderbolts, but they actually mean stomp or foot or hammer. And so the concept of crushing, it would not be a very difficult leap of imagination to see that they would use the power of the gods in crushing things. Or even religiously reenact the crushing of things after some giant earthquake that would have come through. In the Psalms, it talks about the Lord making the hills skip like lambs. And there's multiple Psalms that have overt references to the cataclysmic thunderbolts.
Wow.
Melting the mountains, casting them down into valleys. There's a lot of very overt references to the power of the Jupiter. In its acting as, of course, in that era would be like Marduk, and we see really overt Chinese references to that the Lord is this power who's able to hold the 4 stars together, and we know they're stars because of the Maltese cross, which is a worldwide symbol, including in Cahokia. All these symbols are covered in my papers, both on the origins of religions and in the megafauna extinction series. If people want to cover the megafauna extinction, they're kind of strewn throughout the paper. There are some various plates in the appendices, and then on the origins of religions, there is the appendix, but there's also there's just a giant table with a lot of links. I don't know how many of the links could be dead by now, but at least they're in the bibliography.
All right, well, guys, I'm going to have to step away. I've got to get up and work early in the morning.
I think that this went very well, Lee. I mean, you organize the next speaker. I can set a meeting in the Zoom, and then I don't know how we could just somehow make them host. I figure out how that works. And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for your presentation.
No problem.
Enjoyable.
You pointed out a number of things that we need to be focusing on and concerned about. It's good to hear opening new roadways and at the same time corroborating some of the things that we've been fighting to get exposed for the last 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Right. Can you send this video to us? I mean the PowerPoint. Can you send it out?
The PowerPoint will be in the link in the description for the video, and I'll upload the video just after the call.
Great. Thank you so much. It's very valuable. Thank you.
No problem. It's been my pleasure, everyone. Go forward and conquer. I do think it's absolutely fantastic to be able to give, and the era is strong. People are interested in the alt stream research now. They're questioning the nonsense they've been told, the slaves hauling stones up long, giant ramps and hammering away at them. That kind of stuff. Even when I was a kid, I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
I wanted to mention this podcast I recently listened to, and it kind of touches on the agricultural stuff we were talking about. And it might be right up your alley, Ramon, but it was about the history of the rainforest and it's not nearly as old as they thought it was. And in fact, the original, the first conquistador, they've always dismissed his account of what he found in the New World, because he said that when he went to the rainforest, he found savannas, he found exquisite pottery, and he found extensive roadworks. And people just thought it was something he dreamed up to win favor with the king of Spain or Portugal, whoever was financing him. And now they're going back and they're discovering that that's probably true. And this is recent, within the last year and a half. So I don't know how this might relate to your research, but it might be something to look into or keep in the back.
It relates directly through that dark earth discussion, because when I was reading Graham Hancock's work and he started covering Amazonian dark earths, I said, well, heck, he's missing this technology exists in Kentucky, and there's no indication that he knows about this this connection between Amazon and the Amazon and Kentucky. But I've tried to open him up to the work, but he told me flat out that without reading a whole lot, it doesn't feel like he can get into it. So the more that people entrench themselves in a specific theory, like the Zamora theory, it seems that they're cutting themselves off from the potential mega revelation that could come within this century if we really set about this in a scientific way with data and information and evidence. I think that we could make a huge inroad. I don't know that we'll get into schools, but what does that matter if we win the ground war with the individuals who are already doubting, and then they spread the information? We can take advantage of the same energy that goes towards, again, nonsense like flat Earth. They just lack the information because there's not been a concerted and well-engineered educational program for people who are leaving the mainstream because they know they've been lied to about XYZ. But helping people to understand with rationalism and logic and math and engineering, frankly, how to look at things like Chris Dunn's work. It's going to be challenging, but it's not impossible. We just have to have a really good set of evidence and facts laid out. It's unfortunate that the History Channel didn't like the fact. What I told the documentary guy was, we have enough to make multiple seasons of something like Ancient Aliens, let alone one particular special. He said, well, let's focus on getting one special soul. I'm like, well, heck, pick any area you like. There's a plethora of data. That's not the issue. You know, the real issue is how are you going to distill it down into a simple story without covering all the things that it connects to? If we could get onto Gaia, that would be helpful. And maybe Wall's been on and he follows my work. Maybe he'll see this special and connect us over to Gaia. I have no idea. But we just keep pushing, and the information's there. It's not like there's a shortage. Like I said, a patient just came up to me. That was actually also a guy, he works at the Bluegrass Army Depot, that brought me the information about those mounds and sent me the photos. Then I did the LiDAR work because of the Kentucky from above. And then the patient brought me those things, and then Bruce, and then you guys are telling me that there's somebody in Tennessee who might have found a megalith. I don't think there's a shortage of new information. And we can, if we step about it correctly, we can curtail any arguments of forgeries, etc. We can document everything and have it up and put it on the cloud. It can't be taken down. That's the game plan that I have, at least. Thank you guys for coming. This is awesome. I'm gonna hit the stop record.